to celebrate literature and the arts and so forth. I've been meeting with Gear Up kids every single day from different districts. Like today, there were people from La Jolla, if it was Westlaco. Yeah, last Thursday we kicked off with kids from, where was it? Harlingen. And I'll talk to another group tomorrow. And this is a great time for the community to come together and have conversations. And so when they asked me if I would do a session, I was thinking about, the books that I would have coming out around that time. They call me Güero, which just came out at the end of last year, and the Chupacabras of the Rio Grande that's coming out in April. And I thought, it would be a wonderful time to chat about these two books and to talk about where the inspiration for these books come from and how they are part of a quest by me and by many other authors to center the Mexican American or Latinx experience in literature for young people, to validate their culture, their families, their language in ways that perhaps didn't happen in the past. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit on the Brownsville side so that when they slam their books around angrily, we won't hear it as loud. Okay, so I've lived almost my entire life in the Valley. My parents met at McAllen High School in the 60s. Mexican American on my dad's side, Anglo American on my mom's side. My dad was in the Navy, so I lived a few years outside of the Valley in South Carolina in like all African American neighborhoods. So it's kind of interesting. Like most of my life has been lived either with my Mexican American family in Mexican American neighborhoods, or in African American neighborhoods in South Carolina. So it's kind of this interesting. There's a similarity there that I think is really, really cool. And both of those kind of like marginalized cultures in the United States for the longest time weren't really represented in literature. Like when I was in school in the 70s and 80s, you could hardly ever find in classrooms literature written by Mexican Americans or Latinx people of any sort, which is kind of odd, especially when you were in a classroom on the border just a few miles from Mexico, like I was at Ben Milan Elementary in McAllen, or Lincoln at junior high, now it's Lincoln Middle School. I went to 9th grade in Westlaco and graduated from PSGA. And in elementary and middle school, like there literally was nothing. I think there was one book. It was that Ferdinand Vol book, right? It was happening in Spain, so it was kind of, I don't know, there was some representation. I felt good reading it, like, oh look, it's a Spanish book, yay! So, there were people that had like Spanish names. You're like, dang, all right, so it was the first time. And when I was in high school at PSGA, we read things by Latin American authors, but it wasn't really until I got to college that I started reading things written by Mexican Americans and even realized that, Mexican Americans wrote. And so when I decided to become an author, I knew that what I wanted to do was to take the Mexican American experience and set it at make it the cornerstone of my writing. I found, working with middle school students at Donna ISD and taught at AP Solis Middle School, Donna, that when I approached struggling readers by taking the stories of our culture, those stories that we shared together, lots of scary stories that relate to scary stories, things like La Mano Pachona, La Llorona, Las Lechuzas, all the great stories that we grew up hearing, and retold them in ways that made them more like short stories, narratives that contained the things I had to teach, that they responded really well. And up to that point, I had been trying to write a great science fiction novel that was going to be like the next Dune or something like that, but I gave that up and started focusing on writing things for young people that they would respond well to. And that's kind of where I got my start. My first book is a collection of short stories. About half of them are kind of retellings of those kinds of stories. And I've written, my 15th book is about to come out. I've written a lot of different things. On my Amazon author page, you can see a lot of these different titles. And you can see that there are monsters and weird things on a lot of the covers of them. Kind of ironic. This is just the kinds of things that I write. But though all of this work contained things that were that were somewhat personal. Like, for example, my That's What's Good series. It is kind of like a Percy Jackson series about Mexican-American teenagers who discover they're shapeshifters and have to use their shape-shifting magic to fight off Aztec and Mayan gods. And I based those twins off of my two youngest children, and their family is kind of loosely based on our family, but there's lots and lots of differences, and none of it really delves into like my own personal history. So in all the things that I've been writing, I've been writing a little bit more broadly instead of personally. So when the opportunity came right after the election to contribute a poem to an anthology that was being written for kids of color who were feeling kind of like anxious and worried about the election results and like what might happen to them, kids maybe with undocumented family members or who themselves are undocumented, Muslim kids who are worried about the Muslim ban, kids of all sorts who just felt like the tide was turning against them and their families. I jumped at the opportunity to contribute a poem. Sylvia Vardell and Janet Wong put this anthology together called Here We Go. And the poem that they asked me to contribute ended up being the very first poem in this book called Border Kid. And it's a poem about a boy who goes to Mexico every Saturday with his father, and they're coming back from one of their Saturday trips, and he sees the border fence there, invading the Carrizo at the river's edge, and he just like all the joy is sucked out of him. And his dad is like reassures him and tells him, "Hey, you're a border kid. Our family has crossed this river 1,000 times. No wall, no matter how tall, can stop your heritage from flowing forever like the Río Grande itself." And the poem was really well received and got reprinted in the Journal of Children's Literature. And I read it at the induction ceremony because I was inducted in the Texas Institute of Letters in 2017. And as I came down from the stage after reading it, one of the editors at Cinco Puntos Press came up and hugged me and muttered to me, "If you can write another 50 poems in that kid's voice, I want to publish that book because that would be amazing." And it wasn't something I intended to do, but it was like the thing that I needed to do. This is what happens sometimes with life, right? You have one plan and you're going off in this way, and then life's like, "Nope, barrier, you're not going to go down that road anymore." And you're like, "What?" And then you start going off this other road, and you find out that you're much better off. And this is exactly what happened to me. I started writing the poems, and one of the things that I wanted to do was, my initial plan was to create one of the most well-rounded characters that I could. I wanted it to be more than anything a character study. It's like, it's going to be about a boy, and since it's written in verse, it's going to be a boy who loves poetry. And he's going to be a complex kid. He's Mexican-American. He's going to be from the border. He's going to love to play music like I do. Just have a CD anyway. No, he's going to like playing video games, stuff like that, taking video games with all the kids and like the things that they love to do. But he's also going to be struggling with some things that people don't talk about enough, I think, in children's literature. One of them is that in the Mexican-American culture, colorism is a major problem. We all know that, right? Now, and I wanted to talk about what it felt like to be the Güero in my family, especially since my dad married an Anglo woman, and what it was like to be, that kid in the family where, sometimes you get treated a little bit differently, you're more privileged, people are nicer to you, so doors open for you, they're open for your cousins who are a little more moreno. So I wanted to deal with that. What does it feel like to be that kid? And how do you come to grips with privilege and the demands that privilege places on you? So that was really what I wanted to do, write something really complex. And so I had a cycle of poems that were kind of in chronological order and telling in a very quick version his time in 7th grade in the year 2018, when Trump was for the 2018-2019 school year. And then I went on, there were different sections that were about holidays and celebrations and music and all this kinds of stuff. And when I turned in the manuscript to my editor, to Bobby Bird, he said, "I really, really love this. The kid's voice comes through really clearly. It's great." He said, "But I so with a big heart," which is one of the things that I really wanted to do. to have a kid who's travieso, who's mischievous, but recognize that mischievous is not equal to evil. Like a lot of people think that mischievous kids, boys that have a little bit too much energy, what you've got to do is, like, you know, los tienes que aplacar. You've got to learn how to, like, hold them down. No, don't do that to boys. Like, find ways to channel that energy in positive ways. But Bobby said, I think this book wants to be more of a novel in verse than it is. I think it wants to tell a bigger story. So we started rearranging the poems, all of them in chronological order, and I started writing new poems to fill in the gaps and eliminating poems that didn't quite fit that vision anymore, and it gave rise to this book. They call me Güero. And I've been like really lucky because it has received like amazing, it's had amazing reception. It's won several awards. It like recently won the Tomás Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award, which was like a feather in my cap. That's such an important award for me. It was a Puerto Great Author honor. It got the Claudia Lewis Best Book of Children's Literature for the year, children's poetry rather. Lots of really cool things. And all of that matters to me more than anything because it means that more schools will buy the book and put the book in the hands of Latinx kids, Mexican American kids especially, who could use this kind of thing. So what I thought I would do, just to give you a feel for it, is to read a couple poems to you before switching over to talk about Chupacabras of the Río Grande. One of the important things about this book is this kid and his connection to reading and his the poems with colorism and privilege. So I'm going to read the poem, the title poem. They call me Güero. In my family, I had the lightest skin. My big sister Teresa is toasty brown, and little Arturo's the color of honey, but I'm pasty white, covered in freckles. Everyone's got a nickname for me. Tio Danny calls me at Pecas, while Grandpa Manuel tussles my copper hair and shouts, "Way to go, Red!" Most folks, they call me Güero. In fact, they use that word so much that when I was a little squirt, I thought it was my name. My family loves my paleness, even Teresa, who says she's jealous. I look like my grandmother, lots of Spanish and Irish blood. But at school, it's a different story. As if my complexion's on purpose. The haters say I think I'm all that. Call me El Canelo Chafo and laugh. Canelo Chafo. Their taunts make me wish I could box like Saul Alvarez, the real Canelo. My hands ache to curl into fists and pound my problems away, but I swallow my pride, keep calm. When Dad picks me up, he can tell. What's wrong, Güero? Looks like you're ready to punch someone. As he drives, I explain, jaw tight. My dad puts his hand on mine. It's deep brown, like mesquite bark, or clay from Mexican soil. I wish my skin were like that, not all pink and freckled, turning lobster red in the border's sun to match my rusty hair. Mijo, pale folks catch all the breaks, here and in Mexico too. Not your fault, not fair, just the way it's been for years. Doors will open for you that won't for me. My eyes fill with tears. But I didn't ask anyone to open them for me. Dad squeezes my hand. No, but now you've got to hold them open for us all. And it's a hard lesson to learn, right? It's a hard lesson that you have to own up to the privilege of the world. That you didn't ask for it. You didn't force the world to give you privilege, but the world bends around you if you're pale and if you're white presenting, as we say, right? It makes life a lot easier for you, both within the Mexican American community and outside of it as well. One of the other important things for him is the fact that he loves to read. And I really drew on my own experiences and the way I learned to read and the way I came to read. Because I was the first person in my family to go to college. And that came from my going to college, wanting to be an author, eventually becoming a professor here at UTRGV. All of it stems from the same thing, in my mind, in my estimation, and that is the stories that my grandmother would tell me when I was a kid. And it's a weird, I know it kind of sounds weird, but it's a strange circuitous route. And I wrote it up in this poem called Learning to Read. When I was a little kid, my abuela Mimi would ease down into her old, creaky rocking chair to tell my cousins and me such spine-tingling tales as ever a bingo fronterizo, crazy for cucuys, could hope to hear. I always had questions at the end of Mimi's stories. What was the little boy's name? What did his parents do when they found him missing from his room? Is there a special police squad that tracks down monster hands and witch owls and sobbing spirits in order to save the boys and girls that they've stolen? No sé, mijo, the story just ends. Happened once upon a time, nobody knows. But I didn't get it. I was so literal. I believed every story she told me was true. So I kept asking my questions, guessing at answers, till she broke down at last and told me the greatest truth. You have to learn to read, Güerito. You will only find what you seek in the pages of books. So I began to bug my mom to teach me to read, until she did. I was barely 5 at the time. First day of kinder arrived, and I was so excited at all the books my sister said were waiting on the shelves for me. But then the teacher started drawing the letter A on the board, and I soon got it. None of the other kids could read. She was going to teach us the alphabet 1 letter per day. Not me. No way. I dropped out of kindergarten, little rebel that I was. Of course, you don't have to go to kindergarten. It seemed like a big deal to me, though. Instead, my mom took me to the public library every day, all year long. I read book after book after book, delighting in the new tales, the strange and mysterious places. And when first grade rolled around, not optional like kinder, the school was so amazed at my skill, they put me in a 3rd grade reading class. I got picked on, sure, but I was pretty proud and didn't care when kids called me nerd. The school counselor told my folks, this is now in 7th grade, that I can already read college level. And I've found lots of answers, but also many new questions. Of course, I passed all the state tests with super high scores. Learning in class is easy for me. Dad says all those books rewired my brain, got me ready for study. Just think, I owe it all to those stories my abuelita used to tell us, sitting in her rocking chair as we shivered and thrilled. Even then, words were burrowing into my brain and waiting like larvae in a chrysalis to unfold their paper wings and take me flying into the future. So the mischievous part of the story is the fact that he hangs with a group of boys called Los Babis. Los Babis, there are these 3 boys, Robert Handy, Robert Lee, who is Korean American, and Roberto Delgado, who is Dominican. And since they're all Robert or Roberto, they're called Los Babis. And they're, a little mischievous. And so here's a poem. I'll read 2 poems because they're kind of connected to each other in the cycle of the story. First one's called Mischief, and this one's called Confession. One night, Handy, I use my friend's last name, texts me to sneak out and bring my BB gun. Let's shoot snakes and stuff. Oh dear God, I actually agree. Dumbest thing I've ever done. We walk along the alleys, the 4 of us, taking shots at scurrying blurs, passing the rifle around. Then Handy aims for a street light, makes the world darker with the pull of a trigger. There's something exciting about the effect. And we go a little nuts, each pumping the weapon to smash another light. We laugh like hyenas, give each other fist bumps, run to the next block. The BB gun's back in my hands as we walk past Don Mario's backyard, his huge sliding glass doors. Crack them, Delgado urges, and I lift the barrel. But there sits the old man in his chair, watching me. I lower the rifle. My stomach does somersaults. Don Mario stands, opens the doors, steps into the night. Córranle pa sus casas, he says sternly. Get on home, boys. Ain't no reason for y'all to be prowling about. We tramp home, silent. I keep seeing Don Mario's eyes, his disappointment. Back in my room, I slide the rifle under my bed. I want to forget. Let it gather dust. I don't ever want to touch it again. The next poem is Confession. I step into the booth to confess my sins, but in Spanish. Father Garcia just sighs. Heart beating fast, I realize I'll never fool this priest. He's heard and seen my sins. White lies, copied homework, a stolen comic book, a certain bottle rocket blast, which is a reference to the chuckling, he assigns penance in English. I know your voice, Güero. God knows your heart. Be good. And that's another thing that's really important in this is Güero's religion, his belief. One of the things that you don't see enough, I think, in children's literature is faith. Like I'm not a church-going person myself, but I was as a child and as a teenager, and I think faith is extremely important to our community. And to write the story of a young person living on the border and not talk about his faith would be like really, like you'd be erasing something important about him. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do. And so the book then segs into this other poem that I just, on the fly, just deciding to read to you. I think it'll be a good way to kind of end the, well, maybe I'll read one more afterwards. It's called Thoughts at Mass. During Mass, I look around. Most of our side of town is here, but not my 3 best friends. Handy is Mormon. His big, loving family goes to a meeting house in their ward the next city over. Lee is Presbyterian. He prefers Christian, though I remind him that we Catholics are too. His folks attend a church down the road. Delgado doesn't belong to a religion, though his mom says prayers to ancestors and old gods. He's told me he's agnostic. I Googled it. Someone who thinks it's impossible to know if God exists. This freaked me out a little. It's obvious to me that there's a God because I see him in everything around me, feel him in my heart. How can Delgado doubt him? I spent days wondering, worrying. Each night I prayed for those bobbies. We can't all be right, can we? 3 of us must be wrong, unless we all are? Whoa, impossible. Just now, Father Garcia read from Scripture. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. The judgments you give are the ones you will get. Well, that's a relief. Like an answer to prayer. Can't wait till this afternoon. Those bobbies and me, we're going to go to the movies downtown. So it's just like this the thing about Güero is he realizes that he loves his friends and it's not his place to judge them, and that's between them and their own hearts. And he moves on, and I think that's a healthy way to be. Something that I want to kind of promote. Now, no book describing the 7th grade year of a boy would be complete without a love story, right? So, since Güero is this boy who's kind of a soft boy, I mean, he gets upset and he would sometimes love to use his fist to beat somebody up. He doesn't have the skills necessary, or even, like, the minute he threw the first punch, he'd already, like, feel really bad and, like, probably start crying or something. That's the kind of guy he was. So it's lucky for him that the girl he's got a crush on is a badass. Her name is Joana Padilla, but everybody calls her Joana la Fregona. And this is the story of how they come together. Even when I was a little boy, still thinking girls were gross, Abuela Mimi gave me romantic advice. Find yourself a fregona, güerito. A tough one, who doesn't need you at all, but wants you anyway. Así como María Félix or Frida Kahlo. A woman who will be your companion, your equal in life and love. Now I know what she meant. There's a girl in my social studies class, Joana Padilla. Can't get her off my mind. She's kind of pretty, but that's not what matters to me. She's smart and rude, takes judo classes after school, helps her dad in his body shop, loves superhero films and video games. Okay, I'm a little obsessed, I'll admit, but I have 0 luck. When I ask her to be my girlfriend, she just laughs. I even write her a long poem, which she just sticks in her back pocket like a restroom pass. Nothing works. After school one day, that bully, Snake Barrera, decides to rearrange my face just as Joanna goes walking by. Help me, I call. Help me, Joanna! She turns and tells him to leave me alone. When he laughs and tries to hit me again, she grabs his arm and throws him down. Took guts to ask a girl for help, Joanna says as she pulls me to my feet. I liked your poem. Funny and sweet. Okay, Güero, you could be my boyfriend. I wipe blood from my lip as the kids who've gathered go ooh and ah. Then my fregona smiles. Got any money? We can go to Rosie's. Fighting makes me hungry. And like you learn in the book that Rosie's is like the little stand that's a few feet away from the school where when they're walking home, they go by and get like taquis preparados, aguas minerales, and things like that. So, a slice of life, just trying to tell an honest story about kids on the border. When I talk to the kids for Gear Up, one of the things that I tell them is, I just really want the rest of the United States and the rest of the world to realize that we don't live in some kind of apocalyptic, like desert zone down here. It's not some kind of insane Mad Max film. We are living perfectly normal, happy, healthy lives. Our community deserves to be respected, and not only respected but looked up to for all the wonderful things that we do well, and that people are perhaps unaware of. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, although I'm still going to be talking about the border, and talk to you about this book that's coming out April 16th. It's called The Chupacabras of the Rio Grande. It's book 4 of a series, a middle grade series called The Unicorn Rescue Society. And the guy who created the series, along with a couple of friends of his who are animators and producers of all kinds of audio video stuff, Adam Gidwitz is his name. Adam Gidwitz is a best-selling author. He has published books that have, like his most recent book, The Inquisitor's Tale, that's the most recent book that's not a part of the series, was a Newbery honoree, which is like super significant. He has written books that retell the Grimm's fairy tales. He's written a Star Wars book for young people. He's a really, really well-known and significant author. When he was thinking about what he wanted to do next, he realized that he wanted to write a series that would be talking about cryptids, about like mythological creatures, Bigfoot, the Chupacabras, the Jersey Devil, all these kind of like weird mythical creatures that kids love to read about. But he realized that most of those creatures are embedded in like traditions and culture of groups that he doesn't belong to. As a white man, he's Jewish, but he is like blonde hair, blue eye. Handsome because he'll get, if he hears this, he'll get all like taken aback, and he's not even all that is. Anyway, sorry, Adam, if you're listening. But yeah, there's a certain like we were just talking about privilege, a certain privilege that accrues to that. He was teaching in like this really nice school. He comes from an upper middle class family in New York City and New Jersey, and was able to, I think, a little more easily navigate the world of New York publishing than other people would. So he realized that he wanted to tell the stories, but he didn't want to tell them on his own. He wanted to bring in authors of color, authors from these different cultures, to co-author books with them. So, like, for example, book 3 was co-authored with Joseph Bruchac, who is a Native American, and when they write about Sasquatch, Bigfoot, they're able to look at it from that perspective. So he knew he wanted to write a book that was set in Laredo, because he loves Laredo, and lots of kids love him down there as well. He knew he wanted to set it there, and he knew he wanted to write about the Chupacabra. So he was having, I guess, lunch or dinner with Matt de la Peña, another Mexican-American author, another half Anglo-American, half Mexican-American author like me, who lives in New York. They're friends. And he said, hey, Matt, I'm trying to find just the right author, the right Mexican-American author to collaborate with on this book. I wanted to be set on the border and have Chupacabras, and Matt's like, stop. Border, Chupacabras, Mexican-American, you need to talk to David Bowles. Here's his email address. And so he contacted me, and I obviously jumped at the opportunity to be involved in a project like this. It's being published by Penguin, Random House. It's like, I was like, wow, this will definitely be like the next step in my career as an author. So the way we decided to do this was, he and the Unicorn Rescue Society team asked me to do an outline of what I thought the book should be about. And one of the things that I immediately began to realize was that if I write a book about Chupacabras in Laredo on the border right now, there is a looming issue that you kind of would have a hard time avoiding, and that's the fact that people want to build a wall down the middle of Laredo and down the middle of every other border town in South Texas. And I talked to him about it, and I said, we need to find a way to deal with this, because I think it would be wrong to erase it from the book. It would be wrong to set a book here and just have like a fun, breezy adventure, no problems at all, like everything's hunky-dory. I think we need to face this problem head on. We need to talk about the fact that the community is being subjected to this divisiveness that we would not probably have chosen ourselves. I know there are people that live on the border who see a need for a wall, but they're like in the minority, and like you probably have members of your family, maybe people in this room, people like, watching on Facebook right now, who feel that we do need a wall, but it certainly is not the majority opinion down here in the valley, and I think that most of us would like to find another solution. Like, we recognize that there are some issues, that there are some things that come across the border that shouldn't, some people and some things that come across the border that shouldn't, but like that we see it clear that there are other ways of dealing with that. But that debate, the conversation we should be having, the calm, loving conversation we should be having about how do we do this and keep our communities, our transnational communities intact. Because, I mean, I'm gonna guess that there are a lot of people in this room that have family members right across the border, right? We are transnational. There's gotta be another way of navigating that. So we're like, all right, then we are going to we're gonna go, not only are we not avoid it, we're gonna like hit it head on. We are going to talk about the wall. We are going to have people protesting the wall in the middle of this. In fact, we're gonna make the wall the antagonist. That's what I decided to do, make the wall the antagonist. So what you have is, in each one of these books, there is a mythical creature that needs to be rescued somehow. Something is happening, and they're in danger, and the Unicorn Rescue Society has got to come in, and even though they haven't found a unicorn yet, they rescue whatever mythical creature is there. So the kind of inciting incident is that some cows are found dead in Laredo, and they've been drained of all their blood. And the science teacher, who is kind of like the heart of Unicorn Rescue Society, Mito Fauna, who is a Peruvian guy who started this organization like years ago, and it's got like modules all around the world. He gets his two students, Uchenna and Elliot, who follow him everywhere, a Jewish boy and African-American girl, to go with him to Laredo to investigate this because he thinks it's Chupacabras. And basically what they discover as they team up with a Mexican-American family there on the border is that indeed there is a young Chupacabras that's been cut off from its family by the building of the wall. And as what happens sometimes with animals and with people, when you're cut off from the group you belong to, you begin to go astray. You don't have somebody to show you the right path. You're hurt, you have grief, and sometimes you do things that you wouldn't have normally done had you been with the group. But that's what's happening. Normally, we discover all kinds of things about Chupacabras and the way they lull their prey to sleep and they drink just a little bit of their blood. They're kind of like bats in this story. And they have got to find a way to reunite this young Chupacabras with the rest of the family, with the rest of its family, and also deal with the immediate issues of the wall. Like, they don't solve the problem of the wall, that would be ridiculous, but there are some immediate things about the wall, especially about like family members who are on both sides of the issue that kind of get resolved in a kind of personal way. I thought I'd read something kind of fun though. I want to read to you the kids chasing after the Chupacabras. They chase it into a pulga, so they finally find it. So here's one thing you need to know. In the very first book, Uchenna and Elliot find a young Jersey devil, and the Jersey devil kind of adopts them as its family and starts staying with them. So it goes with them on all their adventures, and it's called Jersey, unremarkably. This is like kids naming a pattern. I think Uchenna, who's a little like more hardcore, wanted to call it Bone Chewer, but Elliot was like, no, that's a horrible name. We can't call it Bone Chewer. So they called it Jersey. The thing about Jersey devils is that when they're in shade, you can see them. When they're in sunlight, you can't. Or is it the other way around? I think it's the other way around. When they're in shade, you can't see them, only in direct sunlight. So that it causes some interesting things as they're chasing it. So it turns out that Jersey is kind of like you've heard of a bloodhound, like it can track. Well, it's like a Chupacabras hound. It can track Chupacabras. And they've kind of tracked it to this place out in the Chaparral, and it's gotten away from it. The adults go off in the car, the kids are chasing it through the monte. So here we go. It's kind of fun. Chupi took them on a brutal pursuit to Chaparral, copses of mesquite, and shadeless stretches of weedy dust. As they ran, Chupi occasionally let out a long, plaintive whistling sound. Elliot expected this to cause Jersey to freeze and tumble into the dirt, suddenly hypnotized, which is something that happened earlier. But it didn't. As he listened to the repeated whining whistle, he realized that it sounded quite different from the whistle that had hypnotized Jersey. Uchena, Elliot called ahead of him, panting as he ran. I think Chupi has different kinds of whistles. Maybe I can document them. But Uchena was nearly out of earshot, and it seemed right then that no one really wanted to document anything. So Elliot focused on running. They cleared a clump of acacia and anaqua trees, and the parking lot of the flea market appeared ahead of them. Chupi was dashing, that's what they called the Chupacabras. Chupi was dashing from car to car, hiding under one before scurrying to the next. Jersey scampered across the blacktop. Whenever he passed through the shade of a parked car, he'd become invisible. Then he'd enter the bright sunlight again, and his blue fur and red wings would sparkle. We can't let them enter the market, Uchena said between gasps of breath. Too many witnesses. Mateo agreed. Mateo was one of the Mexican-American kids who were. And too many hiding places. Right then, Chupi leapt from the hood of a car toward a tree that stood by a fence. It would take him no time at all to climb the low branches and get into the flea market. Oh no, cried Lupita. But midway through the air, Chupi suddenly dropped like a stone and began to roll around in the shade on the ground, hissing in frustration. He rolled into a sunny spot, and Jersey became visible, wrestling with the little Chupacabras, trying to pin him down. But then a low whistling sound pierced the air, and Jersey froze. Chupi wriggled free of the frozen Jersey devil's grip, and still whistling through his nostrils, bounced from the asphalt to the lowest branch, from the branch to the fence, and scrabbled over the top. That was the hypnotic whistle, Elliot announced. You think? Answered Lupita, as Uchena ran to Jersey and scooped him up. The little blue creature was shaking himself awake. Before he could wriggle free, Uchena slipped him into the ventilated backpack and zipped it closed. They all stood for a moment in the blazingly bright parking lot, sweaty and panting like thirsty dogs. Uchena's phone buzzed. She took it out. The adults are already inside. They came in the south entrance. She punched in a reply. Let's go in. We'll search from the north, they'll search from the south. Elliot looked through the fence at the lines, stalls, and throngs of people. It'll be like finding a needle in a haystack, he said. Yeah, Lupita replied, if the needle ran like a jackrabbit and could suck your blood. And so you can imagine, they're in the pulga after this. And you guys have picked up the pulga. Can you imagine trying to chase a baby chupacabras through the pulga? It's a hilarious kind of scene. Towards the very end of the book, there's they have a reunion with a friend of Lupita and Mateo, whose parents are in like a detention center, and so he's staying temporarily with this rancher and his wife, who is the principal of the school. And the rancher's name is Bob Bronfels. And I want to read the scene where they show up, okay? Because it's interesting, and they're talking about the border wall. Because what's happened is a federal judge has issued a stay for 3 weeks on the border wall construction to kind of look over some issues and try to decide whether to go forward. Dr. Cervantes, this is the mother of Mateo and Lupita, says, Bob Bronsfield is your friend? She says this to Mito Fauna, the professor. He wants that wall built more than the schmucks want to build it. Schmucks are like these Donald Trumpian kind of guys. Howdy, Alejandra, Mr. Bronsfield said, speaking for the first time and tipping his hat to Dr. Cervantes. And then, from behind him, appeared a boy about Mateo's age. He had straight black hair that was swept across his forehead and a serious look in his eyes. He was also carrying a homemade sign. Hola, Mateo, he said. Hi, Lupita. Mateo exclaimed, Andres, ¿qué haces aquí? And what are you doing with him? Lupita said, pointing at Bob Bromfels. What do you mean, what's he doing with me? Mr. Bromfels said, putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. Andres lives with me. Mateo turned to the group. This is my friend that I was telling you about, whose parents are in detention somewhere. He turned to Andres, but I thought you were living with our principal, Mrs. Bromfels. Then Mateo's mouth fell open and his eyes got really wide. Oh, he said. That'd be my wife, the rancher said with a chuckle. Then he picked up his sign. It read, no wall, no law, in big black letters. Mr. Bromfels went on. We came for the protest, but the professor here said he had something he wanted to show us. Is that right, Professor? Mateo said, wait, Andres, you're helping Mr. Bromfels protest in favor of the wall? What, said Andres? ¿Estás loco? He spun his sign around. In bright blue capital letters it read, Somos una familia. We are one family. And where is mine? Everyone paused for a moment as they read the sign. A lump formed in Elliot's throat, and tears collected in the corners of Uchena's eyes. Andres and I don't agree on much, Mr. Bromfels said, but we both believe in free speech.
And he added, something very serious, I don't think kids should be separated from their parents. Not ever. I'm glad you mentioned this, Professor Fon exclaimed. That is why you are here. Elliot, Jenna, you have not released it yet? They shook their heads. Show Mr. Von Fuchs what is in the box. Elliot and Jenna hesitated. The crate set behind them on the ground. A plaintive whistle was echoing from within. Dr. Cervantes stepped between Mr. Von Fuchs and the crate. Erasmo, because that's Mito's full name, Erasmito. Why on earth do you think you can trust this man? And Professor Fauna drew himself up to his full height, because those we disagree with are not always our enemies, Alejandra. Now, por favor, show it. So that's one of the things that we wanted to do. Like, how do we grapple with that? How? Because it's easy. It's easy, and I do it all the time. It's easy to see people on the other side of the debate as like monsters, right? We've got to be careful not to fall into that trap. Some of them are monsters, but not all of them, right? There are plenty of people, like you have people in your family. There are Chicanos in the border area that believe that we should build a wall. And they're not all like insane monsters. They may be wrong. I think they're wrong. But we're all wrong about something, right? And maybe if we like maybe listen to each other and talk it out instead of like just immediately hurting each other emotionally, maybe we could convince people that our perspective is the right perspective. Maybe if we tried listening to them and they tried listening to us. That's the tricky thing, right? Is that we both have to listen to each other. It's not enough that the ones who are against the wall go, okay, well, let's listen to the people who are in favor of it. Like, the people who are in favor of it also need to go, well, let's listen to the people who are against it. It's got to be a two-way street, right? And that's the tricky part, because I know I have a lot of relatives that have kind of had to block on social media because I'm tired of, because they don't want to listen. I would listen to them, but they don't want to listen to me. And so like you reach a point where you're like, In the book we wanted, especially since we're writing for young kids, right? We don't want anybody to say to us, oh, you're trying to indoctrinate kids into like a liberal person. We wanted to say, look, there are good people on both sides of the issue, of this particular issue about the border. People who think who are misguided maybe, they have the wrong impression, they think there's a crisis happening here because they're not here, they don't know what's going on, or maybe they need to be educated. Maybe if we did the work of teaching them, maybe if there was less misinformation, maybe if the government did its job and told the truth about things. It's all these elements, right, that are involved. And it's a tricky thing to write a book for kids that is respectful of Mexican-American culture, that's respectful of our community and so forth, but that that looks at these issues in a way that isn't just idealistic, that's a little more realistic. And hopefully we did an interesting job, decent job. So we're going to tell me what time it is, because I think we're coming to a close.
2:41.
Okay, so what I'd like to do before we kind of wrap things up is just open it up to any questions that people here or in Brownsville might have for me about either of these books or any kind of observations that you might have. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Yes, ma'am.
When did you decide to choose Chupacabras?
Yeah, so I think that it was Adam who chose the Chupacabras, and I think that what he was trying to do was pick something that would be immediately recognizable to the broader people, like people, even people who are not Latinos, they know what a Chupacabra is, so they've heard about it, right? Whereas if we had done something like El Cucuy or La Mano Pachona, that it would be less. I mean, it would still be cool. I could totally see one about like some species of creature that we think is the Mano Pachona, but it's maybe like some kind of hand-looking spider. I mean, I can think of all kinds of really cool ideas. But that's what he went with because it's immediately recognizable. One of the things that as a result, that we had to talk about was, I told him, you do realize that the Chupacabras got started in Puerto Rico. It's not originally from Mexico. It started in Puerto Rico, and then I don't know if it swam, but suddenly it was conveniently, when Carlos Salinas de Gortari was president, that was when suddenly there was Chupacabras all over the place in Mexico, as he's like stuffing his pockets with money and getting ready to leave office. So what I had to do was, and the cool thing about it is I've studied Mesoamerican folklore mythology for a long time, and there are creatures from Aztec and Maya mythology that are kind of similar in some ways to the Chupacabras. Perfect example is the Ahuizotl. In the Ahuizotl, it's A-H-U-I-Z-O-T-L, the Ahuizotl. is this creature that it mainly lived in the water, but it had like a spiky stuff down its back, and it had like human or monkey-like or raccoon-like paws, and then it had a tail that ended also in a hand, and this thing would like grab people and like kill them and like extract their teeth or whatever. And so it just seems like that kind of gruesome, like kind of creature with a spiky back like Chupacabras used to have was really cool. And then there's also the feathered coyote, which was this kind of mythological being that looks like a dog but has quills, you know, like feathers instead of. And so, you know, I basically had so Dr. Cervantes, Alejandra Cervantes, the biologist who they work with. She's married to a man who is like a curandero who runs a hierberia, and so he's got like more indigenous knowledge, and she's got more scientific knowledge, and they've come to some conclusions about what this creature is and what people used to call it or whatever, so that I could make the Chupacabras be the word we use now for something that's existed for, you know, thousands of years in indigenous thought. So that was a lot of fun trying to find those connections and making them, because otherwise, you know, there's no mention of Chupacabras before the 90s. They're like obviously something that's like arisen recently. So that was why we used it. And I have all kinds of really cool ideas. I've tried to pitch to Adam and the rest of them that it would be really cool to do a unicorn rescue society at Mexico. That would be like the kids from this book going on adventures in Mexico and like, you know, going to Monterrey and dealing with el hombre pájaro and like all these different like creatures. There's tons of really cool creatures throughout Mexico. That would be a lot of fun. And I like that kind of stuff. I love mythological creatures. I write about them all the time. Other questions about Güero or about the Chupacabras?
Oh, not about that.
Will they ever finally find the unicorn? The goal is that, like,
I have
in
a
the
quick
last book.
question.
Yes, of course, in the last book. Yes. Brownsville.
For the blog questions that we were supposed to answer,
Yes.
we're talking about the critical viewing, the 9, right?
Right.
There's 9 questions. Those are the ones you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. She's talking about the assignment for class. Yeah. It's in the it's there in the
In the sheet?
like there in the what is it called, the guide for the book? It's there.
The
Like
teaching guide for like.
yeah. I mean, I don't remember what page it's on, but it's wherever it talks about the interview that
It's on
Trevor
page
knows.
3.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Page 3. Other questions? Thank you so
I
much.
had a different question.
Oh yeah, okay, but I just let me wrap up. Oh, you have a question? Is it like a FESTIBA question or a class question?
No, I can wait until after class.
Okay, hang on. So yeah, let me wrap up the FESTIBA thing, and then you can ask a class question. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your attentiveness. You've been fantastic. Go enjoy the rest of FESTIBA, and
Thank you guys who are not in my class for showing up. I appreciate that.